Hey, everybody, it's Mike Broadwater, Superintendent of Loveland City School District. Unfortunately, at our board meeting last evening, June 16th, the Zoom recording malfunctioned. It was a Zoom error, but we want to make sure that we get the presentation out so that those individuals that have an interest in watching can watch. And basically, the idea was to present to the Board of Education so that they could vote on the resolution to have the 4.9 mill levy audited. So the process is such that, number one, there will be an audit for the 4.9 mills by the auditor. Once that is completed, the July 26th board meeting is when the board would vote to whether to put the 4.9 mill levy on the ballot or not. So between now and July 26th is the opportunity to have conversations and ask any questions that you may have. But I want to present this as we did last night, so everybody has an opportunity to watch. And again, I apologize that it did not record properly last evening. It was an error on Zoom's end. So the first slide here, the superintendent update, June 16th, 2022. What I put was our graduation ceremony. If you haven't been to a graduation ceremony here at Loveland, it's awesome. And it shows you the incredible responsibility we have to educate our children and our families and our students. They rely on us to make sure that we are of the highest academic institution, as well as being fiscally sound in the decisions that we make. So it's important. It's a big responsibility that I have. Mr. Giuffre, our treasurer, and myself, we have been working on the finances of the district for months and months and months to figure out where we need to be. And the 4.9 mil that we have recommended to the board is what we consider to be the minimum to get out of deficit spending. And we consider it to be reasonable for our community. Our community has spoken in the last couple levies, and we want to make sure that we listen, we're reasonable, and it's the minimum to get us out of deficit spending, along with some other things. And those other things, what I want to let you know very simply, what does this levy mean? What does it get our community? What does it get our kids? And the first part you can see is this operating levy is needed now to maintain current educational programs. That is the biggest idea behind the 4.9 mill levy. Is we want to maintain the excellence that we have. Our staff does an unbelievable job with our kids, and we just want to maintain that. When we went through the strategic vision process, we heard from our community that they trust our schools. They want the best for our kids. They want it done in a fiscally sound manner, but we really are looking to maintain what we have. Second part there, the high school busing, part B, we will bring back high school busing if we have the 4.9 mill levy and it passes. That is contingent. You'll always hear me say that's going to be contingent on having the necessary drivers. You may recall we've gone to a 3-tier system, and we've changed our start times for next year. And part of the forethought of that was, if we're able to bring back high school busing, we'll be able to do it a little bit easier, simply because the high school busing, the tier it'll be attached to is the early childhood center, and we'll be able to turn that around a little bit quicker than if we had the other system. But again, it's going to be contingent upon the drivers. If we have the drivers and the levy passes in November, we would be looking to turn around as quickly as possible, whether that means December, January, but we are going to be ready to go with the routes. If it passes in November, we just need to have drivers. The third part and last part is we are looking at 5 FTEs. That's just 5 individuals, 5 staff members to be available if needed. And the biggest thing there is, in the strategic vision, we heard about safety. We heard about the mental health supports. We heard about the gifted program. We heard about performing arts. So what does that mean for the next 3 years? If we have the levy in November and it passes, we would have the availability of 5 staff, and we could be a little bit more flexible in what we're doing. I do want to remind you that a couple of years ago, the district did cut 47.5 FTE. So it was a large cut along with high school busing, and that's allowed us to extend the 2014 levy all the way until now. So very simply, to recap, number one, biggest part of this is we want to maintain the excellence that we have going. Number two, we are going to bring back high school busing in the budget. High school busing is roughly $500,000. It could be up or down depending on driver salaries and the number of drivers, but we are very confident, and we are promising that high school busing would come back. given we have the drivers to drive the high school busing. But again, it would be about $500,000 budgeted. If we cannot find the drivers, and it takes us a little bit of time, any money budgeted for high school busing will stay there. It won't be spent for other things. And then the third, we're looking for a few positions, 5 positions, to the first year of 23-24, to the second year, 1 the third year. Gives us some flexibility if we want to bring back the gifted program in a different venue, whatever that may look like. It just gives us some flexibility. So again, Mr. Jouffre and I sat down, we went through the 5-year forecast, we looked at the strategic vision. In the strategic vision, we didn't hear that our design team wasn't saying we wanted to spend a lot of money. We wanted to be strategic about it and determine what programs are needed for our kids, and really adapting to what's going on in the world today. So that's it, the 3 quick ideas, how it's going to be used. What's going to happen if we don't ask in November? There's no question significant reductions are going to need to be made in order for us to balance the budget. And I'll get into the 5-year forecast a little bit. To balance the budget is going to be very, very difficult with the large deficit spending that we would have if we don't have additional funds. I bolded, it's going to have a critical impact on the education of our children. The Loveland Schools has done a good job. The cuts, the 47.5 cuts earlier, really, we were able to stay out of the classroom because of 2 things. Number one, our enrollment went down over COVID. We were expecting that would pick back up. And with the cuts, it kind of coincided. We had cuts of staff, but we also had enrollment go down. So we've been able to maintain class sizes. The number one thing that we want to protect are our classrooms. We want to protect the size of the classroom, having enough staff to support our kids. That's job one, is making sure we're educating our kids properly and keeping them safe. But any programming or services that are not required by law, by the Ohio Department of Education, could be eliminated if these funds are not made available. And I don't want it to sound like a threat. It is what it is, right? We need the funds so that we can maintain what we're doing. We've tried to make it as reasonable for our homeowners as possible so that we could still continue what we want to do here. Part B, I think it's probably pretty evident, high school busing will not be restored if we do not have additional funds. And we know that would be unfortunate simply because we have some kids at our high school that need that transportation. It would ease the burden of some of our families. The question I have been getting, and I've got it at the end there, the time is never right when it comes to asking a community to support their school district and students by increasing taxes. This is my least favorite thing to do as a superintendent, is to talk about levies, talk about finances. I will always keep an eye on the bottom line. We're always going to look at FTEs and make sure we're not having the FTE creep where it increases. We are going to maintain FTEs. That's why we've asked for 5, is because we monitor those closely, because that is the largest part of our budget. The last levy was in 2018. That's 8 years ago. And that's the last time we had additional revenue. And I'll go over why that is here in a minute. But it's important to know that we are trying to be reasonable with the request, and it's going to maintain what we have. If it does not pass, we know that there are going to have to be reductions, and it's going to start touching the classrooms. The inflation that's going on right now, we get it. You know, I filled up my truck last night with gas, and it was very, very expensive. We're all experiencing that. But the longer you wait when it comes to school finances, the longer we wait. If we want to do the same thing, if we have a 4.9 mil in November, if we would wait later next year, it would be over 6 mils, and there's no guarantee inflation's getting better or there's going to be a recession. And unfortunately, when it comes to school finance, we don't really get to wait according to the economy out there. We try and extend it as long as possible, but when there's a need, there's a need. And we're in deficit spending right now, which is a very big concern of mine as a superintendent. My biggest obligation is letting this community know these additional funds are needed to maintain and bring back a few things like high school busing. And I take it very seriously as a responsibility of mine to let the community have the opportunity to say, yes, we want you to maintain what you are doing, or if the vote goes a different way, then we've heard from the community as well. Okay. The next slide is the next question I always get, which is, what is it going to cost me? I'm going to look at the last column over here, which is the property market value of a $300,000 home, which is close to the average home in Loveland. It's a little bit higher than 300,000, but I'll use 300,000. The assessed value, which is 35% of the market, is $105,000. The annual increase in property tax would be $514.50. When you look at that monthly, that would be $42.88. So right around $40 for a $300,000 home per month. The little side note I put down here is 1 mil is going to drop off after 2023 due to the debt incurred from the 1998 renovation project. I think it was the renovation of the high school and some other large renovations. And that was $32 million. That debt is paid off at the end of 2023. So you will see 1 mil come off of your tax bill. So the 4288 really, you could drop, if you drop 1 mil down, that's to take about $14 off there. But that's just to give you information. I don't want to confuse the two, but give you information that we are in a good place when it comes to paying off that debt as well. Fourth slide, I've heard from people saying, why in the world do we need a 4.9 mil operating levy now? Why can't we wait until the economy is better? So I want to show you here the bottom 2 rows. That is if we do not have the levy, if we continue where we are right now with our revenue. This year, the budgeting went very, very well. We ended up in the black, $78,000, which tells you it's pretty close, right? We're pretty close in our budgeting. When you look at next year, if there is no additional revenue, we will be about $3.6 million in deficit spending. And I always explain deficit spending, it's like you're using your credit card, you're charging, and you know, when you use your credit card, you're paying that off while you're still trying to run a house. And so it's tough. And so deficit spending, when I see deficit spending, that tells me I need additional revenue or I need to cut expenditures. We have not had new revenue for 8 years. Our expenditures, we've already cut 47.5 FTEs in high school busing. If we have to cut expenditures, it's going to get into the classroom when we're not bringing back high school busing. So I feel it is my responsibility, again, as the superintendent, to let our community know that. So you see a $3.6 million deficit in 2023, 2024, virtually the same, $3.6 million deficit. And you can see our cash balance goes quickly. And you never want to determine when you're going to go out for a levy by looking at cash balance, simply because when you're in deficit spending, that cash balance goes very, very quickly. And so that is why we are looking at it now. Why 4.9 mils, 3.5 mils, 3.9 mils, 4.5 mils will not get us out of deficit spending. It will not allow us to bring back high school busing. It would not give us any flexibility if we have an increased enrollment or if we are looking at bringing back any programming. And so the 4.9 mil levy gets us out of deficit spending. We can afford the high school busing now once we get our drivers, and then we can have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to what our strategic vision is. Again, being reasonable, but 4.9, that is why we are at 4.9. And again, it's less than the last couple asks that this community has been asked to pass. And why can't we wait until the economy is better? We kind of explain this may be the best time to do that. If inflation continues, then we would look back and say, well, we should have done it earlier. None of us have a crystal ball, but what I do have is this 5-year forecast, and it tells me that I need to either cut expenditures or have increased revenue. Next question, why do public school districts ask for a levy every few years? Why in the world do we have to keep asking for levies? What are these districts doing? Why can't they manage their money? Why in the world can't they live within their means? Well, if you search House Bill 920 on Google, you will find that virtually every public school district in Ohio has a presentation on House Bill 920 to try and educate the taxpayers and the homeowners as to why school districts have to keep coming back for additional money. And that is because when you look at House Bill 920, it was passed in 1976. It freezes the income school districts receive from each levy the moment the levy passes. Even when home values increase, a school district's revenue remains the same because of House Bill 920. So very simply, there is no inflationary adjustment in our revenue until new levies are passed. So the way I explain it is, if your property values are going up, and certainly in Loveland they have, from 2014 to 2022, they have gone up considerably. I think the average was 179,000 in 2014. We're now above 300,000. So as those property values go up, the millage does what? The millage goes down because the revenue stays consistent. Therefore, the chart that I put on here is, if you look at 2014, which is the last time we had a levy pass, the effective millage was 42.18 effective mills. Currently in 2021, the effective mills is 36.93. So why did it go down? Because the property values went up. All right. So very simply, House Bill 920, before 1976, you didn't see as many levies from school districts. Now you do, because we are not getting any inflationary adjustment when it comes to our revenue. If the state of Ohio, and even in my interview when I was looking to get into the excellent district of Loveland, I gave the analogy that you'll have a school district, you have a community, and every 3 to 5 to 8 years, you're trying to figure out these revenues, and it's unfortunate. Sometimes those discussions get difficult. The state of Ohio is up here not really involved in those discussions, and they should be. They're the ones who should be providing the proper state funding for our schools. So we can't really sit and admire the problem. We have to do what we have to do as a community, and the 4.9 mils is the reasonable ask that we can use to get out of deficit spending. Part B that I wrote down here is kind of goes along with what I just said. We've had all 5 state legislators I've had in to come in and talk about, meet our kids and see what a great school district Loveland is, and our kids are awesome, but also to let them know that the way the state funding is for Loveland, it is not what I would call a fair funding plan. When you look at everything that we do here, we don't have much business or infrastructure when it comes to companies. Loveland is considered a wealthy district by the Department of Education, one of the top 40 wealthiest districts in the state of Ohio. And so what that means is we do not get much of a share of the state funding. And so therefore, it does go to our taxpayers. And we know that our taxpayers, you, the homeowners, are in a situation where you have to fund a lot. We appreciate it. I think, again, it's my responsibility to inform everybody what is going on with our finances at the school district, and let you decide for yourselves how you would like to fund it, using the reasonable request of a 4.9 mil levy. Number 6, when was the last operating levy? We've already hit that. That was 2014. The effective millage, when it was passed, it was a 5.6 mil operating levy. And due to House Bill 920 that we just kind of described, the effective millage right now of that it currently is 4.67 mils. So even though it was passed at 5.6, it's now at 4.67 mils. That's a decrease of 16.7% in effective millage, again, due to House Bill 920. And I will say that the 8 years that Loveland School District has gone without additional revenue is the longest in the history of these schools. That's 8 years. And so, again, I always like looking at the picture of graduation, and it just refocuses what an amazing responsibility we have in educating these kids and making sure they're prepared, and making sure our community knows that we are being fiscally sound in our decisions, and being reasonable with our ask. 7, what has Loveland City Schools done to manage its budget each year? The first part with our hiring practices this year, Mr. Collier, our HR director, and myself, we monitor how we are hiring, what our hiring practices are. If we have a teacher or any staff member that retires, they will be at the highest part of the pay scale. What we're looking at is hiring 0, 1, or 2 years, so that we can capture that difference and we can have that as additional revenue. And so this year, I can tell you where we are right now. We've saved over $500,000. We're approaching $600,000 in the difference between the individuals that have retired or resigned and the new hires. So we've captured those funds. Obviously, as you go through the years, because of the salary schedule, that goes down, right? So as their pay continues to go up, the cost savings will go down. But every single year, we will be doing that to capture as much as we possibly can. We maintain FTE counts this year. When I came in, I said we want to make sure that we're watching our head count. We want to make sure that we are not having people in our buildings not knowing how many FTEs we have. So we have developed a chart where we keep track of FTEs. We know where they are. We are maintaining. There used to be about 550 FTEs. With the cuts, we're down to 504.5. Next year will be around 505 because, as Part I says here, we did have to hire an additional FTE, which will be coming out of the general fund. It's a special ed requirement for a paraprofessional next year, which is an aide in the classroom to help out a student that we are required to do that. Part C, contract for all staff. Our staff members, our teachers, and our classified, certified and classified, and our administrators are all going to have a 0% increase this coming year. Last year, our teachers took a 0%, and all the other salary schedules were reevaluated to make sure that we're being fiscally sound with that, knowing that we need to make sure that we are rewarding the people working with our kids and able to hire the best out there. And our staff, there is no better staff in the state of Ohio, in my opinion. Our Loveland staff takes care of kids, and we want to make sure we take care of them. I do want to say thank you to them because they recognized their part in all of this by doing a 0% last year, 0% this year from the teachers. But we have contract negotiations coming up here soon. With the current financing, we would have a difficult time getting a 2-year contract certified by the auditor simply because of the lack of funds. Ideally, you would like to do a 3-year agreement. We would not be able to do that unless there's additional funds. Other things we're doing, the ESSER funds, we spent strategically. We received about $5.3 million in ESSER funds. If the federal government would continue that, we wouldn't be sitting here asking for a levy. It would be great, but that is going to come to an end. We supplanted about a little over $2 million in salaries. And when you look at our expenditures, that's why they went down considerably. ESSER funds were available, and we made the FTE cuts, 47.5 FTE cuts is how we've been able to stretch this levy. Alternative funding, Part E there, tuition for full-day kindergarten, grants and business partnerships we discussed in the strategic vision. So that's going to be a focus of ours moving forward, is how can we work with our business partners and what grants are available. And then third, another example is our pay to participate in our athletics and other programming. We do have pay to participate, and there's a slide on that here soon. Next question, 8, how does Loveland City School District spend its money? Like all other districts, it's people, right? We have, when we look at our expenditures, 64% of our expenditures are in salaries. That is the first line here. The benefits, we're at 22%. So all told, that's 86% of what we do is salaries and benefits. And I can tell you that every other school district is there. That is the amount that they're spending. You will see that it's always going to be in the 80s. You don't want it to get into the 90s, but it's probably going to be in the 80 percentile. The purchase services is 10%. Purchase services means something like our Hamilton County Educational Service Center contract, our Warren County ESC contract, and other purchase services. An example of what's in the Hamilton County ESC contract is we have individuals that come into the classroom to help our kids, school psychologists. We have occupational therapists, physical therapists. Those are individuals that we're able to control the costs, because it may only be 1 or 2 days a week. It could be 5 days a week. But in that Hamilton contract, we're able to control our costs a little bit more on those auxiliary positions that we have. But we review that every single year. Supplies are about 3%, not a whole lot. And then anything else that sits there is about 1%. So you can see in the pie chart, the salaries and benefits is our job. That's what we do. We're people intensive, and we have reduced staff as much as possible. My concern as the superintendent right now is if I am asked to cut expenditures because we don't have additional revenues, it's going to touch the classroom. And I think I need to let the community know that moving forward. Number 9, do students pay for extracurricular activities? I put this chart on so you can take a look at it. Loveland, we are at $310 for each participant at the high school level, $265 at the junior high level. Is there a family or student cap? No, there isn't. And what that means is if a family has 3 children and all 3 are playing a couple sports, is there a cap on how much a family can pay? There is not. So when you see the yeses over here, those are the districts that do have a cap. We have the ECC, the Eastern Cincinnati Conference. That is a conference we are in. We have the GMC, the Greater Miami Conference, which is a large conference where you have your larger schools, the Lakotas, the Masons. And then we have some other, it's in the area. So when you look at these, you can see Loveland is the highest. When it comes to high school, it's $310. The next lowest would be at Lebanon and West Claremont. I'm sorry, the next highest would be $250 at those 2 districts. When you look at our junior high, we're still higher than any other district as you go through here. So we try and make sure that we're being fiscally sound when it comes to extracurricular activities as well. And that was an example I'd use as alternative funding. So I wanted to just put this up as an example. So the final talking points, the 4.9 mill levy, very simply, it's to maintain what we do. It's to maintain the excellence. At the end of my first year, I can tell you our teachers, our entire staff, our bus drivers, everybody does a fantastic job with their kids, takes care of our kids. I know our parents are happy with what we do in the buildings. We want to maintain that. We want to maintain the excellence that we have. When you look at our test scores, all the metrics, we do very, very well. And so we want to maintain that. The second one there, it allows for high school busing. High school busing will return. If we have the 4.9 mill levy, we will have the necessary funds. Like I stated before, it's around $500,000 a year to bring back high school busing. Depending on negotiations, that could go up a little bit, but we know that we have the funds to bring back high school busing with a 4.9 mill levy. It also, number 3 there, excuse me, allows for 5 additional people in our buildings. If we want to bring back different programming, gifted, perform, whatever it may be, what we want to take a look at and how we can best service kids where there is a need, we want to be able to do that. Number 4, we explained House Bill 920, which is why we're sitting here. There is no inflationary adjustment as we go through there. If the state of Ohio could work in a 1 or 2% cost of living adjustment every single year, we wouldn't be sitting here every so years trying to figure out how to increase revenues or cut expenditures if we could just have that inflationary adjustment. Number 5, we work hard. There's not a single day that goes by that I'm not having conversations with one of my team members on what are we doing to cut costs, how are we maintaining costs. There are always going to be state and federal mandates that come down that are out of our control that we have to fund. And so having a little bit of flexibility to make sure we can do that is always a good thing as well. Number 6, if action is delayed, the need is going to be greater. And again, this isn't saying it's a threat or anything. It just is what it is, right? If it's 4.9 mills in November, if we wait and we wait for the next year, the way funding works, if you pass a levy in the year 2022, you will get the new funds January 1 of 2023. If you ask for a levy in 2023, no matter what month, you're going to get those funds January 1st, 2024. So you've got an entire year that you're waiting, that you're chipping away at your cash balance and it's deficit spending. And therefore, in order to catch up, you would either ask for more mills. So 4.9 mills would go probably above 6. Or if you ask for 4.9 mills, that means now you are cutting expenditures. Now you are cutting. And I don't think it's responsible or prudent to pass a levy and still have to cut. And so the 4.9 mills, again, developed because we felt it was reasonable. It is what we can use to get out of deficit spending, bring back high school busing, and have the 5 FTEs. Plain and simple, that is what we're trying to do. In the board meeting, Dr. Swetchenow asked the question about this slide. I have additional slides after this. I'm trying to keep it as short as possible, but there are additional slides you can go through and you can email or call me if there's explanation. But I want to make sure I review this slide as Dr. Swetchenow asked. And we put this on all of our newsletters. I call this a return on investment. It sounds impersonal because we're a school district, but when you look at ROI, what you're trying to do is get the most for your money, right? And so when you look at, I'll look at this chart first, the operating expenditures per pupil, and this is in Hamilton County. Loveland, you can see, is below Indian Hill, St. Bernard, Sycamore, Marymount, Cincinnati. All of these schools, we are at $10,950.56. This is in 2021. And our performance index is one of the highest at 95.2. So in my mind, that's pretty good bang for your buck. That's a return on investment. If you look at this graph, the average PI score is 74.89. You want to be above that, and Loveland is. Loveland is high. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 districts at or above where Loveland is. And if you look at them, Forest Hills, you've got Wyoming. If you look at Wyoming, they're at 13,669 per student. And so we're in the quadrant you want to be in. You want to be above the average in PI. The vertical axis here, the average is $12,664 for the operating expenditures per pupil. You want to be to the left of that. So we're in the quadrant you want to be, and we are at the highest performance index with the lowest operating costs. So for me, that's a very good return on investment. The other slide, and I will leave you with this, we've got a couple other slides. If you have questions, feel free to email or call. This slide is what I ended my presentation with, and it's to show exactly where we are. When I go through this, I want to make sure that we're coming across that we can have good, respectful conversations. We have to model for our kids how we can have disagreements, whether you're going to vote yes, vote no, whatever it may be. We need to make sure that we're sticking to the facts. And I want to make sure we get out as much information as possible and be as accessible as possible going through this. So when you look at this, I'll end with this. The purple is if the 4.9 mill levy passes in November. If it is asked, if the board puts it on and it passes, this would be our funding. If we wait until 2023 and a 4.9 mil passes, that would be the orange line. If we don't do anything, this would be the dotted line. So you can see, if we don't do anything, once you're in this pale orange, it's caution from the state of Ohio, and they start digging into your finances. When you get into the red, which is emergency, now you've got a lot of answering to do to the Ohio Department of Education in regards to how you're going to rectify the spending and the deficit spending, which again means you're either increasing revenues or cutting expenditures. That's all you can do. The orange line shows you if we were to wait until next year and pass 4.9 mils, you can see the disparity already right out of the gate. The cash balance, that's that whole deficit spending idea for a year. The cash balance goes down pretty dramatically. You can see you get almost 2 years before you're in the caution zone again with the 4.9 if you wait until next year. Here, if we go in November, you have 1, 2, 3 before you dip into that caution. And that's where we felt it is reasonable. We end up right here with 4.9, right on the cusp. And that means we can get out of deficit spending for the most part. We can do some things for our kids, bring back high school busing, and make it reasonable for our taxpayers in regards to what that would mean. So with that, there are other slides that you can take a look at. I don't want to make this too long. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Please feel free to set up a meeting with me. I always like meeting people and explaining it. And again, I appreciate what Loveland has done for our kids up to this point, and we just want to maintain the excellence that we have. So thank you. I hope you found this informational. And again, I apologize that the Board of Education meeting did not record. It was a glitch on Zoom's end, and we'll make sure we work to fix that. So thank you, and thanks for everything. Take care.